What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of The Jungle. We have officially entered into season two. Season one kind of went off with a bang, and I've gotten a lot more attention and a lot more views and uh, than basically I had ever anticipated with this project. The whole goal of this project was just to bring to light some of the issues that felons face when they re-enter society fresh out of the gate because and I've said it 100 times before, there's not really any rehabilitation while you are in prison. It's you're left to your own devices. You're left to do it yourself. And so I've brought one of my buddies on here. We are basically at two separate points in time. We were two of Rootstown's most wanted. and I've known Tony for a long time. His mother married my best friend's father in high school, and that's kind of when I met Tony. We went to the same high school, and we both kind of got caught up in that whole opioid epidemic and went down the rabbit hole with drugs. Tony's got a good story. So he's out, he's doing his own thing. He started his own tattoo business. I wanted to have him on. He's doing big things. So without further ado, guys, this is my guy, Tony Schmidt. Tony, say hi to everybody.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah, for sure, man. So basically, we're just going to follow the regular format. But like I said, towards the end, I want to talk about because you just had some issues trying to find housing as a felon. And, at this point, yeah, you've been home for a little bit. And like we were talking before the show, it's kind of like a life sentence at this point. So it is a mindset, you just have to work a little harder to get the things that you want, but it is possible. So Tony, why don't you just tell everybody real quick, what your childhood was like, who you are, where you grew up, and then we'll go from there.
I'm from the area. I'm from Northeast Ohio, and I guess similar story as a lot of people, and then maybe unique in some ways, in the fact that I didn't have a terrible childhood um, for a decent portion of my childhood. My family actually was pretty well off. We lived in basically a historical monument. This house, it was like we like literally took school field trips there. Giant house, and for a lot of years it was kind of surreal like that. Then things took a turn for the worse. Parents got into like tax evasion trouble and got fed cases. And Chris, this was before I met you. Um, so things were good until they weren't. So I didn't come from like having it really terrible. I had like even when the shit hit the fan, I always had like grandparents. I always had like somebody in my corner. So I didn't have it terrible. Um, I wouldn't say like super privileged, but like I definitely had advantages that I probably squandered and didn't utilize. But anyways, I didn't have it terrible. So some people that kind of have went through a lot of what we went through, I hear their story and I think, well, no wonder, because they had it terrible. They were,
Not to cut you off, Tony, what's wild though is a lot of the guys that I have on here, and I guess maybe it's a Northeast Ohio thing or it's just where we grew up at, but the more and more of these that I do, the more I am hearing, and that's what everybody has to understand. Like drugs and bad choices and things like that, they're not exclusive to bad childhoods. They happen to everybody.
absolutely.
A lot of these guys that I'm having on here, they had. I mean, you knew me growing up. Like I came from a good home, man. I was a spoiled
Absolutely.
brat.
Yep. You had
I
solid
had
people for sure.
all the time. Yeah. So it's everybody needs to understand, it's crime and drugs and all that. It's not exclusive to poverty stricken communities. It
Nope.
happens in wealthy communities, and this shit happens all across the board. So go ahead,
Absolutely.
man. I wasn't trying to cut you off.
No, no, not at all. Yeah, so really, like you were saying, all walks of life, and I kind of come from one side of that, the other end of the spectrum. I didn't have it bad, but anyways, I found probably around the time that you and I met, honestly, was around the time things kind of began to escalate for me. It was just a little smoking weed and typical teenager stuff, but basically all the family turmoil that I was experiencing at that time, the divorce, and then I found out I was adopted, and and all of these other things kind of like it led me to go from a typical teenage drug experimenter to really kind of pushing the envelope, trying harder stuff. And I don't know if it was maybe genetic predisposition because I believe both of my parents, biological parents, had used. I don't know if it was that or just circumstances in my life or upbringing or whatever. But for whatever reason, I was one of those unfortunate people that that experimentation didn't last long. It took hold real quick. So I definitely had the bug. I'm super predisposed to addictive everything I do, addictive personality, if you will, right? So
Yeah.
so early teenage years, I was already pretty well off to the races. And if you were to ask, any family member or one of my peers from back then, you knew pretty early on that it was going to be a wild ride for me. I was not going to be one of the guys who put it down or got away from it easily. It was the cliches were going to come true in my life. The death or graveyard or penitentiary thing. You're either going to be dead or end up in prison. That's pretty early on. I think everybody pretty much knew with me that that was going to be
No, I
what it
can.
was going to
I
be.
mean, I can attribute to. I mean, first meeting you, and I mean, your old brother, or your old what he would be, what, your brother-in-law or
Wes,
stepbrother, Wes. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, me and Wes we used to get it in, man. We used to party, but I very clearly remember, and not to like, but not not to put levels on it, not to, but you were a partier, dude. Like you
for
went
sure.
hard.
Yeah, yeah,
I remember you coming over to Travis's house, and I'm not going to mention last names, but I mean,
right.
see all across the board, and you were just always go, go, go.
Yeah, yeah. And I was typically willing to do not even just substance wise, willing to do whatever because that was for sure. I remember pretty early on, like how you get tell like you make these promises to yourself. Well, I won't ever fucking smoke crack, or I won't ever do this, or I won't ever. Like you make these as you're doing coke. You say, well, I won't ever do this. I won't ever smoke it. Or when you do pills, you say, I won't ever do heroin. So I remember pretty early on breaking all my own rules to myself. Like really quick. So that's kind of like what
Well,
I remember.
I talked about that in another one of my episodes. You set these boundaries, and it's kind of like, and mine was always needles. I always
Right,
said I would never fuck with needles. And
right,
it was like the second that I crossed that line and the second that I put a needle in my arm, it was off to the races. I was booting doors in. I was stealing from my mom.
right,
I was doing
right.
all the hood rat degenerate shit that I said I would never do, that was totally out of my character. I mean, when I got arrested, people even said, they were like, we don't fucking get it. Like that. My wife tells me to
That's
this day,
exactly what I mean. Right,
yeah, she's like, that doesn't,
right,
that's not even you. That's not the Chris. I can't even imagine you as that person. So
right, right. But it's that's right, and that's I honestly do remember that and thinking that about a lot of guys, you included. And then looking back even at myself, we kind of had like all the advantages in the world, like I mean, especially you, dude. You were a big dude, and you were gifted athletically, and you had a good family, and I mean. Like we had all these advantages, man, and we kind
yeah,
of pissed it away, and then you find yourself, you catch yourself doing things that you never would have dreamt, even in your worst moments. Even just months prior. Like I never seen myself doing those things, and I just kept it escalated so quick. I kept catching myself breaking my own rules and surprising myself. That's how fast it escalated for me. And basically, when and I never I did everything. I was what they consider poly addicted. I would do just about anything. I was
yeah,
addicted to every drug I ever did, and I would do anything in front of me or whatever was available. But when the pills hit, when the opiates hit, the drugs that actually make you sick without them, not just regular addiction, but the addiction that when you don't, other drugs, if you want to stop, you could stop. And that got me when I found opiates was that's the worst possible thing that ever could have happened. And I'm lucky to be here right now. And you know, we've lost so many people. I feel so fortunate to be here with you today, because most of my best friends, almost everybody who I was with daily towards the end of my using days, are all gone. So,
Yeah.
um, and that's kind of how it was for years. I went hard until I found the opiates, and then it just got even worse. And I ended up going to prison the first time for robbing a bank in our hometown. Tiny little town. I went in and robbed a bank, no mask, right across the street from our high school.
Hey, Tony, can I, if you don't mind, and if you don't want me to put this out there, I'll totally edit videos. And I wanted to tell you that before the show too. If I ask you a question and there's something you don't want out there, just tell me and I can go back and edit it. But
Not a problem,
I,
bro. I'm pretty much an open book, like as
I've
far as all that
always,
stuff goes. Yeah.
I've always wondered, and this has ever since you did that, because just for anybody that's listening, this bank was right across the street from the high school that we went to. I mean, the kid that I played football with, Jared, his mom, Mrs. Hankins, she was like the manager at the bank. Like she knew who all the students were over there.
Right.
You, what led you to go into that bank? Was it you were just sick and fucked up from like withdrawals, or were
Yeah.
you like not, were you out of your like right? I've always, that's always been something I've wanted to ask you, and I'm sorry I didn't ask it before this, and we're
That's all right.
we're on the air, but what drove you to go into that bank? Because like I said, we had people like fellow students are their moms worked over there. You went to high
Yeah.
school across the street, and it always threw me for a loop. I'm like, out of all the places he could have went into, why did he go into that key bank?
Yeah. That's why I didn't use a gun. Honestly, God, because it was in our hometown. That's why I didn't take a gun. But um, the reason why I did it that day, there was. Let me just say this: there was no planning. It wasn't like um, from the time of conception to the time of completion, there was maybe 5 to 10 minutes. So let me just say that it was not like
Yeah.
a thought out, planned out thing. But at the time in 2009, unlike now, there was absolutely no treatment options in Portage County. There wasn't Pinnacle. There wasn't any of
Root
that stuff.
house. There wasn't. Yeah.
The only thing, there was a couple things in Akron, and I couldn't get a bed. I was calling on the phone to this ADM detox place. I couldn't get a bed. I was driving through Woodstown one day, and it came to a head. Like I knew that day that I either wanted to die, or I wanted to be over one way or another, whether it was death, going to jail, whatever. I knew that day that something major was going to happen. I was at like a precipice, if you will, like something was going to go down. So I seen the bank. I thought to myself, well, not only will I get I'm either going to get away with it, or I'm going to get caught. And at the time, or they'll kill me doing it. And at the time, that was I didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but I knew one of them three things obviously was going to be the outcome. And so I was just driving through Rootstown, and I seen the bank, and it kind of all went through my head real quick. I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I had some dress clothes in the back seat of the car because I had this insurance sales job, like that I had just got fired at because they found out I was using, and you can't write policy
Right.
if you're under the influence, right? So I went to insurance school, and they found out that I was using, so they put me on leave from American Income Life. And anyways, I changed into some dress clothes, and I went in and I robbed the bank. No gun, no nothing like that. Just went in, told them, it's a robbery. I don't want to hurt anybody. Hurry up. And I did, and I didn't get caught. I got away with it for a little while, before I was told on, and eventually got caught. But yeah. So that day, basically, Chris, to answer your question, I was just ready for, I was ready for something to happen, and that was it. I figured this is a real great way to kind of force change. I didn't know what was going to happen, but that was it. I knew something was going
And
to happen
that's,
if I ran and robbed a bank in my hometown with no mask on.
yeah. And that, dude, so, and my story is very similar, only, I mean, it's the house that I got caught in. Dude, I was homeless. I was dope sick on a daily basis because I couldn't get enough to support the habit to the quantity that I needed. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I very clearly remember that old man walking in on me in his house, and I broke down in tears, put my hands up. I was like, he was a little old man, and I'm like, hey, like I was fed up, and I
Yep.
told him, I said, I'm just tired, and I said, I'm sorry, and I said, I'm not sorry that I got caught. I'm sorry that I'm in your house, and I'm sorry, you know what I mean? And it was all
Right.
apologies, but I said, I need help, and you're right, dude. There was back when the whole opioid epidemic hit and all this shit was going on, there was no Pinnacle, there was no Root House, there wasn't any facilities in Portage County. I remember I went to different facilities. I went over by Mercy and Canton to detox one time. I went into ADM. I went into so many different detoxes, none of which were in Portage County because Portage County wasn't equipped to handle any of that.
Right.
And I remember being in the same boat and having that, it's like that feeling of desperation and hopelessness where you're like, I don't know where else to turn. I'm I'm pulling out all the stops. Somebody's going to stop me, whether it's death, whether it's the cops, whoever. And I'm doing it until I fall off the rails. And
Yep.
I mean, unfortunately, when that's your mindset, you fall off the rails pretty quick, but
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So
so
yeah, I just knew it was that day. That was the last day in my mind, at least. And what's crazy is it ended up continuing for some time. I didn't think I was going to get away with it like I did for a while, and unfortunately, I did get away with it. And I had a little bit of money, and then of course, in my polluted, distorted mind and crazy way of thinking, I got away with it so scot free that I started looking at other banks, and thank God that I got caught when I did, because instead of going to prison for one bank robbery, I likely would have been fighting multiple
yep,
robberies, because I was definitely looking at some other places. I didn't get much money. I only got a little over $1,000 when it was all said and done, because I threw the die packs out of the bag in the bank. So I didn't actually leave with much cash, so it didn't last long. Um, and uh, so anyways, I was looking at a bunch of other banks, and I ended up getting told on, caught up in a sting, trying to purchase a gun and a vest from a guy who was my barber in Brimfield. But anyways, so thank God I got caught as quick as I did, or else I probably would have had two or three or whatever. I was definitely and you know how I am. If I got away with one, when I'm probably going to hit more. So thank God
well,
I got caught. Yeah, thank God I got caught
that's
when
that
I did.
whole, yeah, that's that. And I did an episode with a guy from California. He was doing home invasions. He's a big TikTok guy, and he's a truck driver. But him and I started talking, and once you have that addictive personality, and
Oh man,
you get that adrenaline rush from committing stuff like that,
yep,
it's fucking wild
yep,
how easy it is to continue doing it.
right.
It's almost like that becomes just as addictive. So no,
Oh, for
I get
sure,
it, man.
without a doubt.
Yeah, I and when I got caught, they took me around for days. The U.S. Marshals did, and looking at houses, and I was suspected of over 80. I had one that I was guilty of in Summit County, and they slow rolled me until I came home. So I
Right.
had come home, was doing what I was supposed to do for about 4 or 5 months. And then Cuyahoga Falls showed up on my doorstep, and they're like, "Hey, we've got your DNA," and I'm like, "Fucking here we go again." So it's they'll get you, man. You do more than
Sure.
one, you're going down smoking one way or another.
Right. Yeah. And honestly, God, I thought about the houses, and that's one thing I didn't get into. I was scared, to be honest with you, because I grew up in a household where my dad used to tell me, we had we'd caught some people on the property, kind of looking at the house, and he always used to tell me, listen, Tone, if somebody comes in the house, you don't shoot them, you kill them.
Yeah,
You don't leave them alive for them to tell their side of the story. If they come in the house, that means you're in fear for your life. He goes, if you hit them, you put them down for good. So I come from a household where I was raised where if you shoot somebody, if they're in our house, you kill them. So I always was leery of the home invasions, which is crazy, because in my mind I'm thinking a bank robbery is more safe. I'm less likely of getting um, killed in a bank, because they're basically just taught to give you what you're asking for
yeah,
and get you out of there, right? So I knew it was going to be quick and relatively painless. And there were some guys in this area that I knew at the time who had gotten in trouble for some banks. Frankie had hit a bank in Shreveport, and they gave him 3 years. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, 3 years might be a perfect sit down for me. I'll be able to get off this heroin shit, and At the very least, I'll get off the heroin and I'll just go back to my regular partying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
3 years might do good. Now, I didn't think in a million years they were going to give me 7 years for the bank robbery, considering it was my first felony conviction. I wasn't expecting that. But anyways, that's maybe a whole another story. But they definitely gave me more time than what I was anticipating. Because in my mind, as I was doing the mental math on, okay, if I get caught, this is what they'll give me. I can do that kind of time. I'll come home, um, yada yada, tatted. But it's not so much time that the world changes. That, you know what I mean. 3 years really isn't that long, you know.
Yeah.
So, anyways, yeah, I was thinking I was going to get between a year to 3 years, and they ended up giving me 7. And then, of course, I go to prison and I get in trouble in prison, and I don't end up doing 7. I end up doing quite a bit more time than 7 years. So, um, yeah, not exactly what I had planned, but you know,
So
this
what did you get in trouble in prison for? What was your overall, how many years did you serve total? And you
okay.
did
So
Fed time too, right?
yeah, well, that was something separate though. So, but I get 7 for the bank. I go to prison. I'm gang banging in prison. I'm selling dope in prison. I'm putting in work. So I had one outside case for stabbing when I went to Lucasville, and then I had an outside case for conveyance and possession, of course, of heroin. So I came back from a visit where I had swallowed some balloons, and they caught me coming back. I was in the process of puking the balloons up, and they hit my cell. The what we call the Men in Black, which is like the
SRTs. Yep.
SRT guys, right? Yeah, they hit my
That's
cell, and
that's strategic response team for anybody that doesn't
right,
know.
right. So they caught me with some balloons and a bunch of packaging materials, a bunch of squares cut out for magazines so that I could package the product up. But so I ended up getting 2 separate outside charges. So I would have only done probably 5. If I would have been good, I would have done about 5 years and came home. And instead, altogether, I did 9.5.
Okay.
Uh,
That's a fucking
between
long time, man.
yeah, between the county and then my actual number was 9.5. And then I I did that. I came home on PRC and parole, and I was home for about a little less than 18 months. So I made it a little less than a year and a half. It was about 16 and a half, 17 months. And then I got indicted by the feds for a trafficking case, which is um, 920. I had 922G and an 841A and C for the people who know about Fed stuff. Basically, I was selling narcotics, and I was using a firearm to protect the proceeds, but they ended up not being able to get me with the gun and the drugs together. So the 924C got dropped to a 922G. But anyways, that's basically what it boils down to: was a dope and a gun case. A guy that I grew up with. I don't know if you ever knew him. He was a Ravenna guy. He didn't make the transition over to Rootstown, and me and him weren't close enough for me to ever have introduced you guys to him. He was a Ravenna dude, a guy named Zach. He wore a camera on me for the DEA and came and bought some dope from me earlier in the day, and then a pistol off me later that day, all on video camera. So I didn't even make it 2 years when I came home from the bank robbery case. And I lost almost a decade of my life from the first case. And then the second go around, the Fed, because it was such a small amount of drugs, and because I didn't have the pistol and the dope together, thank God, he tried to buy they coached him. They tried to get him to get me to give him the gun and the drugs at the same time, which I didn't do simply because I didn't have them together. I just didn't have it,
Yeah.
or else I would have. But they only gave me 37 months, and I got super lucky. To be honest with you, COVID just hit when I got sentenced, and like literally, it was really just taken off, and like literally, I got sentenced. I was one of the first people that the Fed sentenced via satellite on a link, I was one of the first people in the country that got sentenced like that, and there's all kind of law about having to be sentenced in person. So like I had to sign off on all this stuff, and so I was one of the first people that had that, and it played a big part in me only getting the amount of time that I did because it was at the very beginning of the pandemic, and I don't know if things were crazy then, like
Yeah.
um, the country was just like completely going crazy. So I only ended up getting I got 37 months for that case. So 3 years and a month.
Okay. So so you go down and obviously you started tattooing. I mean, you're tatted the fuck out now.
Yep,
You
covered.
started
Yeah.
so you come home. What was the defining moment kind of being, was it obviously you got back into the shit, you got back into the streets when you came home.
Yep.
So you didn't learn your lesson necessarily the first time around.
No,
What
absolutely not.
was what was the defining moment when, and what was your motivation? What was all that like when you finally, the light clicked on, and you're like, this is fucking stupid, I don't want to do this anymore?
Well, yeah, it definitely wasn't the court or prison or probation or anything that taught me my lesson. I mean, I did all those years and none and that really had little to nothing to do with me eventually kind of the light bulb kind of clicking on and me, for lack of a better term, removing my head from my ass. But uh because in there really it was nothing more than criminal college.
Yeah.
And tattooing honestly is the only thing. My art was the only thing that I got positive. Other than I did meet a handful of pretty good guys that, despite meeting them in there and the unfortunate circumstances, I met a handful of pretty good guys that I still talk to this day. One of my best friends, probably one of the best dudes I've ever met in my life. Unfortunately, Mikey Bruno, he's doing a life sentence, but he's and it's kind of a whole nother story. And I don't want to get off on a tangent, but he's like one of the most genuinely decent, light, just cool dudes that I've ever met in my life. And he shot and killed a guy by accident. A guy was attacking him and his girlfriend on his property. And anyways, long story short, he accidentally killed the guy. He's doing a life sentence. He got a life sentence at 17 years old. So he'd never been to a bar, never been to a strip club, never got to do a lot of things in life. And this guy was never coming home. But anyways, aside from tattooing and maybe meeting a couple guys like Mike, who really looked out for me and they really showed me the ropes in there and kind of they made me a better guy. They polished me up.
Yeah.
Dudes like him, guys that I respected, who for the first time, a guy who was tough and that I respected was kind of telling me, like, "What are you doing, man? That's like I learned a little bit of polish in there, having respect for myself and people around you, and carrying yourself, like a man, and being respectful. Like being smart and respectful isn't stupid and dorky and corny like I was raised to believe as a kid. You know what I'm saying? Like that ignorant point of view. But anyways, that's about all I got from prison was my tattoo. And then for me, what kind of woke me up was when I came home and my kids, who were babies when I got in trouble, I came home and my kids were not grown adults, but old enough to where they, a kid like just preteen or young teen years. The last time I had seen them, they were infants. So I come home and they're just super individualistic, and they got like like their own little, I don't know, just like crazy person, like cool personalities and whatever. And I see these like people that I didn't know them. I just literally came home to two semi-grown strangers who
Yeah.
look a lot like me and have some dispositions that are a lot like me, considering that I wasn't raised, they weren't raised by me, that nature versus nurture argument. But I'm looking at like two semi mini me's that I don't know, and it's because of the choices that I made. So that's literally honestly what kind of woke me up was I realized that if I continued down the path, I would for sure never know those people and they would never forgive me. So I just kind of like told myself like I refuse to kind of give the rest of my life away, especially to like, to drugs and to peers who don't give a crap about me. Like I had to at least um, give it a like I had to be genuine and give it a shot. Even if my kids didn't forgive me, I told myself this a bunch of times. Like they may never forgive you, but it doesn't matter. Like you have to try. You have to genuinely try to stay free and hope and pray and do what you can do to try to get back in their good graces. Whether they do it or not, it doesn't matter. Whether they forgive you or tire you, it don't matter. You have to at least try. That way they can see that you cared. And that's literally what kind of woke me up. That was it right there.
No, that's huge because and I like how you just said that you have to at least try. I've got another buddy on that I had on here that it's the same thing. His kids don't want anything to do with him, and he's trying, and he'll call me periodically and he'll be upset. And I'm like, man, you just have to stay consistent. You don't understand. You may not be my cousin and I talk all the time about generational curses because my family for the last few generations has just been fucked up, and like it's all that carries out through the years. And if you don't learn to identify your generational curses and work on them, and I think that's what you're doing, and I commend you for doing it because you're just staying consistent. You're at least trying, and you're at least letting them know you're here and you want to be. And I don't know I know what Tori's your daughter and
Dominic.
Okay. So I've, and obviously I talked to Brian and I talked to Jeremy and all those guys, but
Yeah.
from what I've told, you have been consistent in trying. Like that's, you know what I mean? It's not,
Yeah.
so you have to.
It's definitely strained. It's strained, and it's crazy because I come home and they're teens, so teens don't want a whole hell of a lot to do with any parent, anyways.
Right.
Um, and then you add in the fact that we hardly know each other, and they have their own lives. I mean, they're both of my children's mothers are remarried, and they have really like both their husbands are awesome and they own homes and they've managed to get their lives together and both of them are successful and leading like happy lives. So it's not like they're in bad situations and I could come to the rescue. It's not even like that. Nobody needs any rescuing from me. um but so they have
No,
their
I
own
think
lives. They're both in high school, they both have boyfriends and girlfriends and all this stuff. So I
yeah.
honestly, God, Chris, what I do is I text, and I try to text them a lot, and I tell them that I love them,
Man,
yes.
people don't understand that even just that whether you get a response or not, if you don't get a response, that doesn't mean that they didn't get it. It doesn't mean that they don't care. It's their fucking kids. And
Yep.
I do the same thing with my daughter. I do it with my son too. My son's 19 years old at this point, and I'll still send him texts. Hey, I'm proud of you. I love you. Whether and my son will not respond for anything. And I used to get like I would have conversations with him, and I'd be like, hey, like I need you to like we're both grown men now. Like if you're mad at me, you need to tell me. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to like, I want to hear that you're mad at me if you're mad at me. And he always tells me, he's like, no, but you stay consistent. You keep saying it. And I encourage you to do that, man. Like whether you're getting a response or not. And to anybody else that's out there, whether it's a strained relationship because of prison or a strained relationship because of just bullshit that went on throughout the years, those are still your kids. You can't ever turn your back on your kids. I don't care what kind of damage has been done. And whether it's just a sporadic text, hey, I love you, I miss you, I'm thinking of you. I send 10 of those a week. You know what I mean?
Right. Yep.
And out of those 10 times, 9 of those times, I probably don't get a response, but I still send them.
Absolutely. And that's it. And the response is for you, and it's not about us. Like I don't care if they deny me, and if they did respond and tell me to kiss their ass, or if they don't respond at all, it doesn't matter. I'm going to continue. But honestly, God, though, Chris, I am lucky. They aren't nearly as mad at me as what I feel like I probably deserve. So I
Yeah.
came home and I'm blessed. Both my kids' moms don't try to deny me access.
Yeah.
Everybody's just kind of like being real supportive of me. They just want to see me kind of get it together, keep it together. And so I could have came home to them, telling me no, and I haven't had to deal with any of that shit. So thank God. I came
No,
home
you
to
lucked out because
big time,
Jeremy and Brian are both
big
great
time,
guys. And
super cool, super cool. Yeah.
and I love Eva. I love Amanda. Like you lucked out because yeah, it's a lot of I know a lot of guys that have never been in trouble with the law, never had drug problems, and they fight tooth and nail to see their kids.
Oh
So
yeah,
take
they
yeah,
have
take
it way
your
worse for me, and here I have been an absentee father for the last decade and a half, and you got guys who have been out and been active and engaged, and they have it way rougher than me. They're getting the blues. So like I tell everybody with 2 years that I talk to about this, I'm super blessed. Like literally, I couldn't ask for more. The only thing that I could add would be I had made better choices. That's about the only thing I could.
yeah,
If
but
I
you know, I
had
mean, I
had
think
some choices, that's about it. The only thing I could change.
yeah, but I mean, dude, with time comes growth and with time comes progress. So I think you're doing the right thing. I think you're on the right path. I mean, I obviously if your kids are talking to you, that's a huge plus.
Yep.
Whether it's the level of conversation you want or not, whether it's uh the size of the response that you're looking for that you're not getting, they are still talking to you. So
Yep.
that in itself, and for guys like you and me who have been down to prison, and guys like everybody else who have kids and so on and so forth, to come home and your kids still actively want just the fact that they will talk to you says enough in itself.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So it speaks to your character. It speaks to, so I just encourage you to keep doing all that. So okay. So you come home, you started, let's talk real quick because I'm going to kind of hit two subjects here. I want to talk about programs in prison and I want to talk about your tattooing because you were obviously artistic. You went down and prison gave you a career on the back end. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
do you work in a shop or you own your own shop right now?
Just I do my own thing. Yep, I just do
Okay.
my own thing. I've had some
So
offers at some places. Some people have reached out, but I'm pretty content doing my own thing out of my own little private studio. Yeah.
okay. So you've basically you went to prison and now you're tattooing. Like you at least made a positive out of a negative. But I want to talk real quick because like you said, and like I've said before, you get down the road and there are no programs. You are,
No,
excuse
nothing.
me,
I
you are
mean, there is a list. I mean, and if someone was to get online right now, say, and look, get on ODRC's website, they're gonna see what looks to be um, a pretty decent array of
programs.
opportunities that an
Yeah.
inmate would have. You know, whether it be college courses at different institutions, vocational program at different institutions. Um, there is a bunch of stuff uh, that you are going to see to somebody who is from the outside looking in. If they say are just looking online to look at ODRC in Ohio, for example. But what you find out pretty quick is when you get in there is that there's waiting lists.
It's all smoke and
There's
mirrors.
there's absolutely there's a bunch of factors for eligibility depending on your time and your out date. Then if you get in there and you get in any kind of trouble, which anybody who knows about prison, if you're in any kind of real prison, I don't give a shit what your intentions are. You can go in there and try to do everything the right way and try to keep your head down and mind your own business or whatever, and your number is going to get pulled. It is what it is, unless you go to some chicken shit camp. And if that's the case, good. Congratulations. I'm glad you had good luck. Whatever, maybe your case was petty, or maybe you just luck of the draw or whatever. Unfortunately, that's not how my bit went. You know what I mean? I never got to go to a laid back, kick your feet up, stretch your belly camp ever. I never got that experience. That wasn't in the cards for me. So you start to find out, like, if you have any sort of fighting tickets, that disqualifies you for programs from a year from the ticket. So, the moment I walk in the door, I'm fighting. That takes me out of eligibility for schooling. And then, if your case is violent, I'm down for a bank robbery. If your case is violent, well, that disqualifies you from some stuff. If you know what I mean. So, like, the stuff that they do offer, there is a bunch of factors that you might not be eligible for that stuff. Just because it's on a list on the internet does not mean that you're going to get it. And then let's just say you are eligible. Now you get what's they got waiting list, and it's based off of outdates. So if you have 7 years or 10 years, they're going to look at your outdate and they're going to put somebody in the class who's getting out before you in first, because they need it more, so to speak. You know what I mean? Because they're going home sooner. So based on all these different things, eligibility and outdate and what your case is and all this different stuff. If after all that comes and goes and you're still eligible, well, great. But I can assure you, uh, some, if not all of the stuff you're going to see online, um, is going to, there's going to be different issues with getting into any of them things. And then if you don't have an education, say you don't have a GED or you don't have a high school diploma, you're going to have to go to GED classes first, which I did have a GED, so I lucked out there. But, and then if you, depending on what prison you go to, not all prisons have the same programming. Some have college, satellite campuses for like Kent Stark, and Youngstown State has some classrooms and some prisons in Ohio, but not everywhere has this stuff. So it's again luck of the draw. That's what it boils down to, is luck of the draw.
Yeah. No, it always threw me for a loop. I mean, down in Erie, it was, and I've, again, talking about the former episodes I've talked about, and there's a link up on my website about how Lake Erie was the first for-profit state penitentiary in the US, and CCA of America took it over. And it was funny because that's right when I went down there, and it was like shit fell off the fucking, shit just fell off the rails, and they axed all the programs.
I was in the hole when CCA took over from MTC. I was in the hole waiting to get rode out.
Yeah, you and I were down. I remember that because they told me you were down there, but you were in the hole when I got down there. But no, it was just wild because I always, you talk to your family and your family's like, hey, just get into programs, bide your time, learn as much as you can, trade. And you're like, that's not how it works. Like
sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah, it looks good on paper, sounds good, but that's not how it works. So okay, talking about issues with the criminal justice system and the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. Let's talk about, you just recently, I reached out to you about 2 weeks ago because somebody had sent, we weren't even friends on Facebook, which I don't know why, but somebody had sent me your post that you were looking for housing.
Yep.
So I want to talk real quick just about the issues because that we face when we come home and that we continue to face as we're home, because just like you've been in your place for, I don't know how long now, I'm assuming since you've been home and you had to look for somewhere else to live. And it's a constant battle of finding a landlord that's going to rent to you. Yep. Obviously you have your kids at all, I won't mention where, but you have your kids where you live at. So you want to be close. I know Stark and Summit, they're a little more lenient when you get like into the city. You can find a lot more landlords that would rent. And I think that's what I told you. I said, I could find you a place in Stark and Summit, no problem, but getting you a place in Portage is hard. Portage has gotten too bougie for their own good, I guess. But talk about how frustrating it is. And I mean, just myself too. Like I went into the one profession, not to go off on a tangent because we're going to get right back to this, but I went into a profession, truck driving, where it's probably one of the most felon friendly industries out there. If you're if you want an actual career where you're going to make good money and you're not going to have your felony thrown in your face over and over. But dude, I got to be honest. I'm getting laid off. And so I've started looking for new jobs, and it's everybody. Sorry, my watch is talking to me. You get in, you get on the phone for these interviews, and they're immediately like, hey, have you ever had a felony? And it's wild because it's been 10 years I've been home without even a fucking seatbelt ticket.
Right.
And they don't care. As soon as you tell them you have a felony, it's you've got that X on your back.
Right.
Just tell us real quick about like how frustrating it was to have to try and find housing, and kind of if you have a story or ran into what issues you ran into. And
dude, listen, I probably threw away close to, between my girlfriend and I combined, probably about close to $500 just in rental applications. It got to the point where basically if the property was being handled, the showings and the application, if it was being handled by a property management company, I stopped even applying to those ones.
But hold on, these people, you were paying rental application fees, and then they were turning around and telling you because you have a felony, and then they kept your application fee.
Yeah. So I did dozens of those in there. That's $20-$30 a clip, right?
Yeah.
For each applicant. So I had that, and believe it or not, I don't have bad credit. My credit score is actually pretty decent, but the felonies, what for us on average, some places were 10 years. They wanted a decade. Other places said, oh, well, are they at least 5 years old? And I told them, I said, well, and my most recent conviction, and I guess I should have probably mentioned this, and I don't know if you even know this, but um, right before I went to the feds, I was in a traffic accident, and after the traffic accident, I found out my insurance wasn't any good, and I was in a text message argument with one of the other people involved in the accident. There was three vehicles that got messed up: my Ford Flex Limited, red Silverado, and a black Lincoln car. And the owner of the black Lincoln, who again I don't know any of these people, were just in an accident, right? They hit me up, and he was talking pretty aggressive to me in text messages and in some voicemails about his $1,000 deductible, and he caught me on a real bad day. This is like the third or fourth message he sent one day. He caught me on a bad day, and I was intoxicated, and I sent him back this real long ass message talking crazy to him, and my goal was to just scare him out of texting me anymore, right?
Yeah.
Well, I wrote all this crazy stuff, and this dude ended up being the mayor of Streetsboro, and I got indicted for extortion, bro. No shit, for a text message. So my most recent conviction is a 2022 attempted extortion case, is what I pled out to, for saying a bunch of shit in this text message. Now, mind you, the text message that this guy initiated, I
Yeah.
wouldn't even never had his information had he not have been texting and threatening me about $1,000 insurance deductible. Anyways, so I'm applying for these apartments, and they're looking at a attempted extortion conviction from last year, right? So and I try to explain to these people like what happened, and I'm telling them like, hey, it was just a text message thing, and I didn't initiate it. I unfortunately participated but didn't initiate, and it's way older than that. But the case wasn't resolved till this past year, and I'm trying to explain it to these people, and they're just looking at me like, huh?
Like,
Like
I
they don't
don't
they don't they
care.
don't want to hear it. They're
Yeah.
thinking they can't get off the phone fast enough.
Yeah.
They can't get me out of, like, I'm in the
Isn't it
apartment
wild?
like,
Isn't it wild how even in a complete silence, once that question gets brought up, you can just feel like the air get heavy. Like
yep,
you can tell when they have immediately checked the fuck out after you answer that question without
yep.
them saying,
Oh yeah, and I feel bad for him at that point. Like, even though I also am like frustrated, and I feel a little bit of pity for myself, because like but at the same time I'm thinking like these poor people, they like on paper, if I'm just meeting me and all I'm looking at is like this, I'm thinking this guy might be like they're probably scared for their well being, and I'm thinking like, oh Jesus. So that basically it got to the point where I just started asking people online, hey, do you know anybody renting? And please don't point me in the direction of any just typical listings. If you don't personally know the person who owns the property, like if it's not your friend's income property, if it's not your cousin's rental, if it's not
yeah,
your mom's, like if you don't know them personally and are friends with them, don't even tell me about the listing. I need plugged in on like a I need plugged in on a personal level. Like I can't just like it can't be just a regular listing. So anyways, that's what I was posting online, uh because I know what's gonna happen if it's anything other than that. They don't want to hear the story. They don't care about some of the what I would consider mitigating circumstances that I like to point out, whatever. So I just that's what I was posting. If you know anybody personally that you can plug me in with, maybe put in a good word for me, let me know. That's when you reached out to me and said, hey, I might be able to help you out in another town. But I didn't want to go to Akron. I didn't want to go to Cleveland. I wanted to stay out here because my kids are out here. So
right. No, I mean, it makes it difficult, man. And I remember we only went through it one time. You've never met my wife. I've told this story numerous other times. We when I got custody of both kids after I had been home for a couple years, met my wife. We were living together. We weren't married yet. And, but we were in a small 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Ravenna. Both kids were going to Ravenna at the time, so it was no big deal. And we started looking at properties. And I remember we came out to Uniontown. I live in North Canton now, but we were out in Uniontown, found this beautiful house. It was like a 4-bedroom house out in the country. And bro, my wife, she's got a master's degree, never been in trouble, never partied. Like she checks all the boxes on paper, good credit, made good money. And then I was home for a few years. And I remember we go out and we look at this house, and the woman, we're going through the house. She meets the kids. The kids are excited. We're excited. She gives me the rental application. I see that little box. Have you ever been convicted of a felony? Well, at this time, it's like 2-3 years I'm home. So I'm like, yeah, I said, I'm not going to lie to her. I know you're going to do a background check, and I'm not going to pay you an application fee knowing that I'm just going to lose my money. So let's talk about it. So I start talking to her, and immediately that air, the heaviness, as soon as I'm like, okay. And she straight up said, she was like, we don't rent to felons. And I remember my wife, we went out and got back in the car, and it was dead silent. And she looked over at me, and I was waiting for her to be mad at me because she's never had to deal with, you know what I mean? She's never had to deal with the repercussions of my former life. You know what I mean? That was the first instance. And she's tearing up in her eyes, and I'm telling her, I'm like, I'm sorry. And she's like, I'm not mad at you. But she was like, if I accept you, I'll be damned if nobody else is going to accept you. Fuck that. We're going to go. She was like, we're going to put in work, save money, and buy a house. And that's what we did. I mean, we lived in that little shitbox apartment for the next 2 years, saved as much money as we could. And we said, fuck it, and bought a house. And I mean, obviously not everybody can make that move. You know what I mean? But if you can, I highly recommend the most liberating thing that I ever did as a convicted felon was buy my own house, because now nobody can tell me what I can do, where I can live, you know what I mean? It sucks, man. So when you came home and you're tattooing now, but I know a lot of probation officers aren't okay with like you being a tattoo artist when you come home. I know quite a few guys who, so are they okay with that? Or did you, and talk about how, like finding a job, like,
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I do what I do, because they want pay stubs. They want you to have a crappy, miserable entry level 9 to 5 job, somewhere where they can verify your hours and whatever, and they don't want you into, basically, like, they all look down on tattoo shops as, like cesspools of, drugs and mischief, and it's,
yeah,
like everybody there is junkies or whatever. Like, they think tattoo shops are just, like, not a good place for you to be. There's going to be other felons there, which is an immediate, that's a violation of the supervision rules. You don't get pay stubs. You're getting paid cash. That's another no-no. So that's part of the reason why I do what I do. Is I work, and I kill myself. My schedule is insane. Like, I work all night and shoot tattoos and do my art stuff all day, and I do that primarily, well, for insurance and to satisfy my parole. That's why I do what I do. I work the regular job so that I have verification for that stuff, and then I do the tattooing because that's what I want to do, and I'm doing fairly well doing it, as far as money wise. I'd be doing really great if I could um, devote all my time to it. If I could tattoo full time, it'd be fantastic. But unfortunately, I have to work a regular job because they basically demand it of me. So, at least for the foreseeable future, I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing. But so the answer is kind of yes and no. They know about it. They don't like it, but they allow me to do it because it's not my. I'm not going in there telling them, like, hey, this is my only gig. He
yeah.
knows I'm doing it on the side, and he knows that it's tough for me to do that. So he's satisfied right now with what I got going on, doing what I have to do for him. So he's letting me do what I want to do for me on the side. So that's that.
Well, and I commend you for doing that, because I know a lot of guys that walk into probation, and that's part of getting past your felonies and progressing and growing and doing better is, dude, we spent our entire lives early on bucking against authority, doing things our way, and we see how it turned out. You know, it turned out well for any of us. We all went to prison. And what's funny, man, is most of my friends have either been to prison or have felonies, and they're
Yep.
the greatest fucking guys on the face of the earth.
Yep.
But we've all agreed that, you know, you get to that point where you finally just have to surrender and say, you know what, I'm just going to do it their way. And to be honest, you grow doing it their way, because you're doing it your way never worked out in the first place. Doing
Absolutely
your way
not.
just sent you down the path that you went down. And people got to understand, and to anybody that's listening to this, it's maybe just freshly hitting the streets or fresh out of the gate, you have to understand you have to play their game.
Well,
Ultimately,
that's how life is, and it
Yeah.
won't just end with probation. That's just really good practice for basically what you're going to be throwing for the rest of your life. Because you know this most of this journey, whether it be parole barking at you, or boss barking at you, or maybe your spouse wanting things done, you're gonna life is filled with having to do shit you don't necessarily agree with or understand or want to do or whatever, and you better get good and comfortable with doing that, because if you just don't do everything you don't like or don't want to do or whatever, you are just not going to be successful. I mean, that's just, it is what it is. So, and
Yeah, man.
I've told people that around me, and I told my parole officer that. I said, hey, you know, this was for real, honestly, this was a practice, because this is kind of what life is about, you know, like being disciplined and doing what you don't want to do, especially when you don't want to do it. You know what I mean? Those are like, you know, and I said, this is like a test. If I can come in here and I can jump through these hoops for you, and I can be successful under supervision, then I feel like I can be successful in other facets of my life, whether it be my professional life, like at work and jumping through hoops and playing those games, or whether it be in a relationship where you have to make like all these compromises and concessions and stuff like that. Like, so it has been uh, a learning, like a good tool for me, and I tell people that, and for me to say that, because I used to be the guy who sit there and bitch constantly, oh, probation, this, it's just a trap, they're trying to get me, and I'm not saying I don't ever say things like that or get frustrated, but I never years ago would have ever said anything like, okay, yeah, maybe this is good, and I can see why they put people coming out on this. I never would have made a comment like that, which to me, and to the people who know me the best, that's a testament to my growth and me changing, because to kind of see the positive and to kind of see the point of it despite hating it, right? But just seeing why they do it and what good you can get out of it if you choose to get the goodness out of it. You know, that's how I know I've changed and how I'm growing and stuff like that. So you have to be able to play the game, like you just said, dude. You have to be able to play the game, and that's all it is. Whether it's this
Well,
game or
and
that game, just a game.
yeah, and there's people got to understand too, and this is one of my favorite sayings: is there's a lesson in everything. It could be the shittiest situation on the face of the earth. If you can sit back, analyze it, and understand it's happening for a reason, and there's a lesson in it, and you can take that lesson and apply it down the road or to whatever facet in your life that you need to. That's where true growth comes from. You know, when it's you stop making excuses, you become accountable for everything that's going on in your life. That's where the true growth happens. And you know, I am very thankful to have people such as yourself, to have like Jeremy and Brian and all my buddies, Nick, and a lot of the guys that I've had on the show, because I can sit back and I can look and I can say, that's true growth. You know what I mean? They weren't handed a silver fucking spoon on a platter. They've where they're at right now, they've worked to get to that point. They're fucking hard workers. They're dedicated. They don't want to go back to prison. And that's who I want to surround myself with. They're guys that have seen the pits of hell. They're guys who have climbed up out of those pits, and they're guys who are doing it, making good lives for themselves. I would take 10 of those guys over 1,000 quote unquote upstanding citizens any day of the week.
any
I
day of the week.
I want guys that have seen the pits. I want guys that understand what it's like to have a bad fucking day. And you know what I mean? I want guys like that in my life. So,
Yep.
is there anything else you want to touch on before I wrap this?
No, I'd just like to say, for if anybody's listening who is whether you're maybe a part of the support system for somebody who's incarcerated or about to be released or newly released, or whether you're somebody who's personally going through it, or maybe you're fighting a case, or you're going to be experiencing this stuff in the future. I'd say you just like you have to be patient, and you have to be willing to kind of improvise and kind of make the best out of it. There isn't a lot out there, um, despite what they try to say as far as reentry programming and stuff like that. You have to hope that you're eligible for it, and a lot of times there's these little reasons, these little things that kind of prevent you from getting it. So you have to be creative, and you have to be patient, and uh, you have to kind of. I've learned like in interviews and stuff like that. I've learned like clever ways to when they ask you if you're a felon. I now tell them yeah, and I have a whole spiel that I go through, and I recommend anybody who's a felon, whether you're going to interview for a job or an apartment, you should practice and you should come up with a way to kind of frame your experience as an asset and not so much um, a negative thing. Like for example, like saying that you've been out of the workforce for a while and it's only made you that much more hungry to succeed, and that you'll be more appreciative than the next guy, and that you're less likely to miss work and take things for granted. So try to learn how to frame what what would typically be a negative, as far as whether you were in prison or just have convictions on your record or felonies on your record. Learn how to frame that in a way that shows that you'll probably be more appreciative and less likely to take for granted than the average person. So that's been something that's been useful for me in interviews and stuff like that, telling them like, hey, listen, despite the obvious um, obstacles that my record creates, and the shortcomings that whatever that I have to face that I'm facing because of my record. If you give a guy like me a chance, not only are you going to get, for felons, you're going to get the companies can get grants and tax write-offs for that. You should tell them those kind of things. You should tell
Yeah, companies
you
don't
should
understand that.
yeah, companies don't understand that they can actually get they can get if you're they can get a tax rebate for hiring convicted felons. So mention that to him. Mention to him that you'll be super appreciative and you'll work harder than the next guy, and that you'll forever be grateful for an opportunity. And tell him that the person sitting before them is not the same person that made those mistakes. So I'd say that, and I would just tell people like be patient. um, if somebody like me can come home, and I'm not like rich, I'm not like doing fantastic. I still have to work on a lot of stuff. But if somebody like me can come home, have their own place, be in a decent relationship, have a decent job, have a trade that I'm and a craft that I'm trying to hone, like if I can do it, I believe almost anybody can, because I was a full fledged hot mess. Like I was about as bad as they come, and if I can do it, I there's some people that I used to hear like they'd have all these reasons why they can't succeed, and I'd kind of be like, yeah, they're kind of right. But now that I've come home and I'm doing it, like I don't like people that get negative and they say, oh well, listen, they're finding all these reasons why they can't succeed. I have to call bullshit now, because I was the last person who I thought could come home and do this and jump through these hoops and not be miserable doing it. Let me say that I'm not miserable being sober anymore. I'm not miserable going to probation because I don't have to worry about it. I don't care. I don't complain about taking piss tests. The only
Right.
thing I complain about is sometimes I have to pee on my way there because I held it so that I can go quicker. I used to, drink all kind of water and kill myself taking drinks and all that stuff. That's because I was trying to beat the system. This time, it ain't no big deal. Like it
Yeah.
literally is not. it's not much more than a minor inconvenience. So I would say to anybody having to go through this or know somebody going through this, if you're being genuine, all things are possible. Um, if you're not religious or spiritual, whatever, then you got to find something that kind of like I don't go to church a lot, but I'm a spiritual dude. So like I think whoever is responsible for all this, I see the beauty in all things now, in family and in nature and all that stuff. So I fully I recommend trying to take advantage of all that stuff and kind of get in touch with that. Like life is short. Um, you have to just kind of get over yourself a little bit, and that was like a big thing for me. Is kind of got to get over yourself and stop focusing on the negative and making excuses and just get over it and just have the will to succeed. Just wake up every day and don't settle for less. Stay sober and grind. So that'd be about it. I just say don't get discouraged because it's gonna happen slow. And I'm doing great and I couldn't find a house, Chris. Like that's how me and you linked. So don't think that if you just stay sober, it's all gonna fall into place because sometimes it might not. Like I literally almost just was homeless and I've been doing great, making money, staying sober, whatever, and I couldn't even find nobody to rent to me. But then I finally did, and I'm so glad we got the place we did because that landlord he owns commercial spaces, so now I might have my own actual shop here soon. So things,
Oh, that's
if,
awesome.
if you're patient, dude, things will come together. So yeah, man, I encourage everybody to just stay sober, stay free, and then all things are possible. That's it.
Yeah, man. So you just touched on a really good point. And I had a guy, Sonny Von Cleveland. He's a great fucking guy. He's out of Coachella Valley, California. But he made a statement and it has stuck with me since he made it at the beginning of our episode. And he said, I look at my felony as a bonus to my resume.
Yep.
It's and if you dissect that and you look at what that actually means, it means that you've overcome adversity, that you've made a great life for yourself, you've seen hard times, you've navigated through those hard times.
Yep.
I fucking love that statement when he made it on the podcast, and I carry it with me all the time now. And you're absolutely right. I mean, being able to explain your felony on a job application or a rental application is such a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
You don't ever want to be caught looking like a deer in headlights.
Nope.
It's going to come. You might as
Yep.
well expect it at this point. So you just prepare for it. There's nothing being prepared you should be prepared for all situations. So,
Yep.
no, that's good shit, Tony. Well, hey man, listen, I appreciate you coming on. I know you're working nights.
Cool. Thank you.
Shit. And so for you to take an hour out of your day to come on here and do this episode, man, I am very thankful and humbled that you would do so.
I was honored. I was honored that you even asked me to do it, man. So seriously, I appreciate the opportunity to do it, And if anybody hears it, even if one person hears it, or somebody who used to know me and know how big of a piece of shit I was, if only one person hears it and thinks, "Holy shit, if that goofball, that dirtbag can get his shit together and do it, well, fuck, anybody can." If we get one guy who hears us and it helps, it'd be absolutely worth it. But yeah, I was honored to do it, Chris. Seriously, I commend you for doing stuff like this. I didn't even know you were doing podcasts until you asked me the other day. And life is crazy. I just got done telling my girlfriend the other day, like how these, like, I mean, not that I ever thought you weren't talented or creative enough to do it, but 10 or 20 years ago, you'd have said, "Hey man, this guy be sober, a homeowner, doing podcasts, a great father, and active in the community, and all this stuff." I'd have thought, yeah, bullshit. Dude, listen, again, this is just yet one more testament to what being positive and staying sober and dude, life is good. Life is good, and
And that's yeah, and I appreciate you saying all that, Tony. I really do. And it's one thing that I've learned, and my brother's a pastor, and there's a verse out of the Bible. I couldn't tell you what but it's be a light on others' path. And I think that has been, I get more out of, because I mean, this podcast isn't monetized. I'm not making any. If anything, it's costing me money, and my wife's pissed about it. But
right.
but I get more out of just trying to give back, man. I have no want or will to make any money off this. I mean, if at some point I could make just a little bit back to recoup my equipment expenses, that would be cool. But you have to understand, coming from a point where I had college football opportunities in front of me. I had every opportunity in front of me and I squandered every last one of them. And then to go from that to the pits of hell and to climb my way out of it at this point, like you said, if we could just help one person, and honestly, with looking at my analytics, I fully believe that at this point we have helped at least one person. So I consider this a success, whether it goes any further or not. But I also couldn't do it without guys like you coming on and sharing their story. I want people to understand, just because you're in the pits, if you're currently in the pits, if you were in the pits, if you're actively climbing out, there's light at the end of the tunnel. You have to find that light. You have to see it and you have to strive for it. Like you put one foot in front of the fucking other. And I always say, you put your fucking head down and you run through it like a bull. Like that's it. So, all right, brother. Well, I will let you go. Again, Tony, I greatly appreciate you coming on here, man. I'm glad we got to catch back up, and I'm glad that you're doing great things. We'll stay in contact now that we're friends on Facebook. I love you, brother. And if you ever need anything again, reach out.
Thank you, big guy.
All right, bro. I'll talk to you.
Later, guy.
Later.